Welcome back. I'm Sam of Samwise Coaching and Hypnosis, coming back for the second video in a three-part series to learn how to regain control of your eating and lose weight naturally and permanently. Let's pick up where we left off, creating a new default response. What's a default response? It's your new way of making your brain feel better instead of defaulting to food. These are predetermined automatic responses for when your brain just wants to feel happy. And that's what it's doing when it's giving you the urge to eat when you're not actually hungry. That's exactly what it's doing. Because the oldest part of your brain, often referred to as the reptilian brain, it has two major responsibilities: to avoid pain and seek pleasure. This is literally what's kept our species alive since the dawn of man. And given that it's the oldest part of our brain, it's really strong. It's a lot stronger than the newer parts, the mammalian, the neocortex, blah, blah, blah. If you ever want to learn more about the brain and how it functions, just email me and I'll send you one of the other videos I have. It's on stress management. But I explain in that one how all the parts of your brain are actually working together to protect you. Even when it feels like it's totally not, it's doing the opposite. And I'll demonstrate 3 brain hacks to help you reduce stress and anxiety in as little as 30 seconds. So it's a really cool video. But for now, getting back on track, suffice to say that when your brain is seeking food when it's not actually hungry, it's just wanting to feel better. It's seeking pleasure, and that is normal. It was built to do that. But now we have to teach it a new way, one that serves you better in both the short and long term, instead of immediate short-term gratification with food at the expense of long-term consequences. And we want to come up with these default responses, these default behaviors in advance, because when you're in the moment, your brain literally doesn't think as effectively. Chances are you're either stressed or tired or you're on autopilot. And all of that means that your attention and your energy, they're elsewhere. And so you lose access to any higher thinking. In this frame of mind, we make poor choices. We go for the quickest, easiest thing with the highest reward. Drinkers drink, smokers smoke, and eaters eat. So having a pre-planned default response makes it easy because it's already been decided in advance when you're in a proper frame of mind to do so, when you have access to creative thinking, relaxed, calm, solution-oriented, untriggered. So there's 2 criteria for default responses. The first is that the response needs to be as easily accessible to you in the same way as food. And here's why. If it's not easily accessible, your brain's just going to default back to the easiest thing. And food's everywhere. It's at home, it's at work, it's at every convenience store and fast food joint. It's too easy to go out and get food or to get it in your house. The second is that it has to be pleasurable. It makes you feel good or relaxed. Both are considered pleasurable. So for example, we wouldn't want your new default response to be cleaning the house. Now, I do know that some people really get a kick out of that. They feel a good sense of accomplishment when they clean. But unless it really lights you up, for most of us, cleaning the house, cleaning the dishes, whatever, this is work. So the brain's going to consider it just a distraction, a temporary distraction, busy work. And then once that's over, once again, it's going to come back with that signal to just go get something to eat because it wants to feel good. It's going to say, you deserve it. You did such good work. So just nip that in the bud by giving it what it actually wanted in the first place. Those feel-good hormones that come in a way that serves you short and long term. So let me give you an example of creating a new default behavior based on one of the most common instances when I hear my clients talking about eating when they're not actually hungry. And that is eating in front of the TV. I love this slide. Anyways, the vast majority of my clients struggle with this on a daily basis. So I think it's a really good one to tackle as an example. So step number 1 in developing a new default behavior is identifying the emotion. Think, if I'm not hungry because I wouldn't eat broccoli, what am I feeling that's giving me the urge to eat? For many of my clients, the response is, oh, I'm bored. There's nothing else. So let's start with that. Let's work with boredom. Now, before I discuss creating a default behavior for this, I want to be really upfront and acknowledge that boredom, it can be sneaky. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward and it's just that the brain feels understimulated, sure. But sometimes boredom can also be a surface level emotion, covering up deeper emotions, ones that run literally beneath the surface. Emotions like loneliness, stress, depression, etc., etc. And oftentimes, those emotions, these feelings, are subconscious. That is to say, they lie beneath the level of our conscious awareness. So sometimes one-on-one work is needed. And hypnosis is one of the best tools for seeking out and neutralizing those unhelpful thoughts and emotions that are subconsciously driving our unwanted behaviors. But for the sake of this example, let's pretend that the reason is just straightforward, it's boredom, because that's something that we can all relate to for sure. When you're bored, that's your brain's way of telling you it's not being challenged or it's not fully engaged in the activity. It wants more. Chances are that maybe if you're in front of the TV, what you were watching, it wasn't fully captivating your attention. Let me drive it home this way. Have you ever noticed that when you're watching a movie and it's at a really intense part, you know the boogeyman's about to jump out, or you're hanging on to every word, it's the climax. You're not about to put popcorn in your mouth at the same time. The brain's literally too preoccupied with what's in front of it. It's maybe it has popcorn in the hand, but it's like, you just don't do it. And the same goes if you're doing an activity that requires your entire focus. For example, artists or writers, when they're in their zone, they don't take a break to eat. They're so preoccupied. They're fully captivated on the project in front of them, so much so that hours fly by without them even knowing. And they probably literally only stop once their stomach is like growling at them to remind them to eat. They're really low on that hunger scale. I could go on and on. Downhill skiing. Your brain's too busy keeping you alive, trying to prevent you from falling off the cliff or running into a tree to think about food. So, case in point, if the brain is telling you it wants to be more engaged, our new default behavior, it needs to meet that need. And remember, in order for a default behavior to have the best chance of success, default behaviors need to be as easy and accessible as food and give the brain the pleasure that it wants. So don't challenge yourself with a chore unless that really lights you up. You know yourself best, I'll trust you. But for most of my clients in this situation in front of a TV, they find that doing something easy with their hands while watching TV at the same time often fills that need for challenging the brain, preoccupying the brain, while still allowing them to enjoy the show. Some people, they come up with, okay, maybe I'll draw at the same time, or some knit, some play Sudoku, some go on social media, anything that just preoccupies the mind more and keeps their hands busy. That's challenging the brain. And that typically works for people who just need a little bit more brain activation instead of whatever's just kind of ho-hum on TV. But for about half of my clients, eating in front of the TV is not actually so much about boredom as it's just a way to detox from the day. They feel overwhelmed and the brain is desperately trying to say, I want something to help me relax. So the same thing applies here for creating a new default response. If we know that your brain wants to relax, we know it's not hungry, it wouldn't eat broccoli, it just wants to relax. We need to find a way to do that without giving it food. For many, making a warm beverage like a delicious cup of tea or coffee, maybe uncaffeinated depending on the time of day. You know you. Um, a warm beverage will often do the trick. They're one of the best ways to help you relax instantaneously. Just even holding it in your hand gives you that feeling. And now you're giving the brain what it wants in a way that you can feel really good about. So, wrapping up the example of eating in front of the TV, there are some coaches out there who will argue that if TV is one of your most triggering places for you to eat when you're not actually hungry, then perhaps you should try doing something different, something entirely different. Go for a walk, take a nice hot shower to relax, learn to play a musical instrument, a language, etc. You could come up with a number of things. And they have a point. But I would say that this is a case by case basis. I personally love watching TV because it's something that brings me and my family together. I don't want to give that up. So if you don't want to give that up, then we need to work to find a better way to meet the need of the emotion that's driving you to eat in the first place. But if you're only watching TV because there's nothing better to do, then your brain is desperately trying to tell you to come up with something better to do. And I challenge you to think of things that you used to do as a kid that you stopped doing as an adult. Try giving some of those a renaissance. For many, we used to play music, we used to sing, we used to play games, we had hobbies, we had interests that captivated us so much that when your parent would call you in for dinner, bring in the old dinner bell, dinner, you'd be like, oh, mom, 5 more minutes. Oh, come on, dad, 5 more minutes, please. Remember that? Like, you were having way too much fun to want to come in to eat. So take a moment, think about that. What are some things that you used to do that you might want to consider bringing back into your life? Or what are some things that you can explore now as an adult that you've always wanted to be able to do, or perhaps couldn't as a kid? This could be a whole new world for you. I digress. I could go on and on about this, but for most of my clients, to summarize, if they're habitually eating by the TV, it's because they've trained their brain to reach for food to overcome boredom or as a way to relax, to help them relax. And they've done it so much that the brain has I can't say this word, inextricably, still can't say it right. They've linked the TV and food together and it's become a habit. So it feels like you can't stop. But when we know what the emotion is that's encouraging us to eat, then we can create a new, easy, accessible, healthy default behavior that meets the need of that meets the need of the brain for both the short and long term. Typically, at this point with my clients, once we've reviewed some common times they find themselves eating when they're not actually hungry, I have them agree to 1 or 2 default behaviors that they're going to try for a week based on the emotions they've identified. And then the next time we meet again and we see how that went and if any modifications were needed. So now let's apply this to you. In order to better create new default behaviors, you have to know what the emotion is that's driving you to go for food in the first place. So take some time now. Think about some of the most common times you find yourself overeating. Oftentimes, the most common times I hear from my clients is during work. Typically, it's like the late afternoon. I call that one 3 o'clockitis. Or on their way home from work after a long day's work. They swing by fast food joints or whatnot. Or after dinner in front of the TV, like we just talked about. Late night eating right before going to bed and social gatherings. So those are some of the most common times that I hear. Of course, you're an individual, so think about what are yours. Maybe it's weekends. I don't know. But once you have a couple of those times in mind, it's time to identify the emotion that's triggering you to eat in the first place. So ask yourself, what was I feeling right before I had the urge to eat? What made me feel that way? Some of you might not know that information right away. You might need to do a little bit of journaling, a little bit of homework. Um, Maybe day by day as it happens, just take note of it and identify what was I thinking, but right before, what was I feeling, what was I thinking, um, and notice if there's any repeated patterns. Others, once you know, we can start making a plan. And some of you might know that right off the top of your head. Oh, I'm angry all the time. I'm stressed. My boss was hard on me again. My kids left the toys by the front door and I stepped all over them. Right? Like this could come forward very, very quickly. And if you know, that's awesome. Good job. With that conscious awareness, you can either work to come up with a solution to resolve the thing that made you feel that way, or if it's something that doesn't have an immediate fix, like sometimes we can't always immediately resolve work issues. Sometimes we just have to find a healthy coping strategy, a healthy default behavior. You can still do that. You can give the brain the relief that it's looking for, the emotional detox, without going to food. That's what the brain wants. If the emotion is stress, it's looking for relief. So we just have to think of other things to help you feel better. It all starts with awareness. Awareness is the key, because once you know the emotion, you can work to meet the actual need or desire of that emotion rather than bury it or distract yourself from it with food. For example, if you're lonely, no amount of food is going to fix that. It might feel good temporarily, and then it comes right back. You have to address the need of you have to address the unmet need of the emotion. And loneliness, that's the desire for human connection. So many of my clients experience this one, especially during the pandemic, or or maybe just in general, they don't like how their bodies look, how they feel in their bodies, so they choose to self-isolate. So regardless of the reason, until they're in a position where they feel they can go out and be with people, we have to create healthy default behaviors to meet that need without distracting ourselves from it with food and feeling worse in the end. It's just going to keep coming back if we only distract ourselves. So maybe the new default behavior for loneliness is to call a friend when you're feeling that way, or family. Or maybe if that's not accessible, and for many that it's not, what's the next best option? Hug your pet. Maybe honestly, I've even have some of my clients grab a pillow and hug a pillow, lie down on the couch and hug their pillow. It's not the same. I know it's not the same as having someone physically to hug, but it did provide some relief. It was a healthy coping strategy for loneliness until the world reopened to them or they reopened themselves to the world. And I think it's important to note here that sometimes the default behavior, it might not meet the need perfectly, the need of the emotion. Sometimes there's literally nothing you can do to solve a situation. Like if you're taking care of an aging parent or you have a sick child in the hospital. These are some of the most painful things people can go through, amongst other things, but that one typically resonates with almost everybody. So let's be very real. There are very few things in this world that can make you feel better, faster than food, or that cigarette, or that drink. They're vices for a reason. But if you have the goal of feeling better in your body, of losing weight, feeling healthy, then we have to come up with the next best thing. Something that still gives the brain what it wants, which is to feel better without defaulting to food. In cases like this, where my clients are chronically scared, anxious, overwhelmed, I might teach them some anti-anxiety techniques, quick ones, meditations. Others, they need to move, right? They have an energy in their body and it needs to be let out. And so we have them go for a run or take up kickboxing or something. We get creative depending on what their emotions are trying to tell them that they need and what's easy to do. So circling back, once you've identified the common times you're eating when you're not actually hungry, you've named the emotion, anger, stress, sadness, boredom, etc. Then you come up with a new default behavior that meets the need or desire of that emotion, and you implement it over and over and over again. You create that new habit, and with repetition, it becomes your new habit. And eating when you're not actually hungry just becomes something you used to do, but no more. For some of you, this is going to be easy. It just took some awareness. Oh, I'm not actually hungry because I wouldn't eat broccoli. I'm bored. Right? Now I know what to do. I know to stimulate my mind. I hope everyone's like that. And truly, some of my clients were like, it's amazing. For others, it might be more complicated than that. People are complicated. Life is complicated. And sometimes it can be really beneficial to work with someone to just help unravel your particular situation, to peel back the layers. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes our emotions are beneath the level of our conscious awareness. What we think the problem is might actually have its roots in something else. And that's where working with a coach can help. But just imagine, even if you were able to identify just one emotion today that's driving you to eat when you're not actually hungry, like boredom, and you come up with one new default behavior for just that, how much more in control would you feel? And how much better would that make you feel overall? 50%? 30? 10? That's still better, isn't it? So no matter what your situation is, this program will help you start to make change. And if you need more help, I'll show you ways you can do that at the end. But for now, let's move on. So right now you have a test for knowing if you're actually hungry or not, the broccoli test. And you're working on, or maybe even have thought of already, 1 to 2 new default responses based on the most common times you find yourself eating when you're not actually hungry. So now we need to work on the other half of the formula. What to do when you are actually hungry. How to stay on track. And how to stop eating when you're no longer hungry. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.